Hi everyone, my name is Aerosounds and welcome to part 6 of my Kobolds and Catacombs card reveals. Today I've got another 4 cards to show you. Liz is going to be releasing new cards every day, so be sure to hit the subscribe button if you want to see more videos like this, because I will be updating daily as the cards come out. Okay, so the first card I've got to show you today is a priest card. It costs 7 mana, it's an epic spell and it's called Psychic Scream, and the spell reads, shuffle all minions into your opponent's deck. So what that means is all minions on the board will go into your opponent's deck, whether it's your minions or their minions, it will go straight into their deck. Now, we have seen similar spells to this before. There is a rogue class card called Vanish, which costs 7 mana, and when you play that, it vanishes all minions on the board back to their owner's hand. So your ones go back to your hand, and the other ones go back to your opponent's hand. So this is slightly different in that your opponent does get all of the cards, but the key difference is rather than them going into your opponent's hand, they go into your opponent's deck, and that is a huge difference. In some ways it's a disadvantage because with Vanish, sometimes you could overflow your opponent's hand, which is quite an interesting thing to do. Another card we've seen like this for Warlock class is Twisting Nether. Now this card doesn't return any minions to the hand, but it does destroy the whole board, but it does cost 1 extra mana than this, with the benefits obviously being that the minions die and they don't go into your opponent's deck. Now when you first read Psychic Scream, it feels like it's a bad card, like why would you want to shuffle your minions into your opponent's deck, they get all the cards, etc. But it's pretty important because one, we spoke about Twisting Nether. Twisting Nether does not deal with death rattles, and we've seen a lot of important death rattles been put into this new expansion. So if you play a Twisting Nether, all the death rattles will still remain on the board, whereas this, you play it, you completely wipe your opponent's board. The second thing, it's better than Vanish in a way that it doesn't return the cards to your opponent's hand. So you don't necessarily gain the benefit of sometimes being able to overdraw your opponent by filling their hand with unwanted minions. But what it does mean is that on your opponent's next turn, they may not have many cards in their hand to play. It doesn't give them any extra cards to play the next turn. So let's just say they've only got 2 cards in their hand, but they've got 5 minions on the board, and you've got 1 minion. You shuffle all the minions back into their deck, they're suddenly going to have a huge difficulty in trying to regain that board because they're only drawing 1 card a turn. And again, unlike Twisting Nether, it deals really well with the death rattles. So any death rattle minions on the board, any buffed minions, any jades that have been summoned, they all go back into their opponent's deck. And in the case of the Jades, when they go back into their opponent's deck, if the Jade had already got to above 10 health and 10 attack, that means that they'll cost more than 10 mana, so they won't even be able to play them full stop. And of course, any minions who have been buffed, when they come back out into the hand, they won't be buffed anymore. So it can be really well used in a lot of situations. And I think this will go into a lot of priest decks. Priests at the moment do run Dragonfire, which is an extremely efficient removal. But I think, to be honest, they would probably want to run a Dragonfire and this as removal, because this can be done in much different situations where Dragonfire wouldn't be possible. And also, if you've got more removal spells in your deck, there's more chance of you being able to draw them and more opportunities for you to be able to control the board. So I think this is a strong card actually, and I think it will need some play, and you'll need to understand when you want to play it and when you don't want to play it, but I think people will play it. The disadvantages, of course, are if you've got any strong minions on the board, you will be giving them to your opponent. So if there's anything in their deck that they haven't got themselves, you're essentially giving that to them. And that can be a problem in games which go to fatigue. So that is a possibility. And if you're not geared up for that, you could be giving your opponent a lot better chance to deal with the fatigue game. It would also be quite weak in control matchups where if your opponent's playing a control deck and they already have a reasonably sizable hand, having extra cards in their deck, particularly if they're good ones, is not too much of an issue. And if they do get any battle cry minions back in their deck, then of course they get to play the battle cry again. However, I think this card will be good against kind of a mid-range deck or even an aggro deck. If you can shuffle all your minions into your opponent's deck, especially with aggro, they don't have them in their hand anymore, so they're going to have to draw them before they can play them again, and it just slows them down. So I quite like this card, and I expect it to see quite a lot of play. This next card is a 5 mana 4/4 neutral minion, and it's an epic. It's called the Arcane Tyrant, and I think this again is a good card that I think will see play in a lot of decks. It costs 0 if you've cast a spell that costs 5 or more this turn. So on the face of it, the card is quite weak. 5 mana, 4/4 stats isn't good. But if you can play this with a spell, alongside a spell, then it was really, really powerful. And especially the one we just talked about. We just talked about the Psychic Scream. If you can play that for 7 mana, then you can play this. And you play that for 7 mana, the whole board disappears, and you play this, and you've already got a presence on the board. And that, it costs 0 mana, so you can play it on turn 7. If it's on turn 10, you've still got 3 mana to play with a 4/4 on the board. It works in a lot of classes. I think Druid will benefit from this really strongly. So, for example, when you get to turn 5, or you've got 5 mana because you've already ramped there, you want to play Nourish, for example. And Nourish is a fantastic card to draw. You can draw cards or ramp more mana crystals, but the downside of it is that you lose a bit of tempo because you're not playing anything onto the board. Well, if you play that 5 mana spell, then you play your Arcane Tyrant for 0 mana, and it's a really strong play. It works really well with Twisting Nether, we spoke about before. Destroy the whole board, play this onto the board for free. Ultimate Infestation in Druids. The list goes on. Mage has a lot of strong spells that are over 5 mana, so if you play Firelands Portal, for example, deal 5 damage, summon a 5/5 minion, play this for 0, and it's a 4/4. It's also an elemental, so it works well with the elemental trains. So I think you'll see this in a elemental mage deck. I think we've seen a couple of good elementals come through. It also has to be in your hand when you're casting these big spells, so it's not easy to do. You're not going to get the combo off every time. But even if you don't, which I think you will in most situations, even if you don't, playing it 5 mana 4/4 is not awful. It's not good stats, but it's not awful. So I think this will see a lot of play. I'll have to see how it fits into other decks and what you would drop out for it, etc. But I quite like this card, and I think it will see some play. Next up is another neutral epic minion called the Grand Archivist. Now this costs 8 mana. It's got 4 attack and 7 health. And the text reads, at the end of your turn, cast a spell from your deck, and targets are chosen randomly. So this has some interesting potential, but it does have some key restrictions. One, the stats on the card aren't very good. Seems to be a theme of this expansion is that cards come out with low stats but strong, potentially strong effects. And this one is a potentially strong effect. The problem is you're having to pay 8 mana. So it's going to draw a random spell from your deck. So if you're a mage and you've got Frost Nova, you've got Flame Strike in there, and you've got Blizzard in there, that's 6 cards. If you ran 2 of all of them, that's 6 cards that any one of those will always affect your enemy minions, so it will be really good. But to play that, you have to potentially leave out any of the other direct damage spells, like a Fireball, for example, because it could just hit you in the face. And honestly, if you've got a 6 mana, if you've got a 6 attack Fireball, you don't really want to do it randomly at your opponent, because it could just hit a weak minion that you didn't really want to clear with, or spend that much of a card to clear. So it's a bit strange, but any AoE spells which affect the opponent's side of the board, that can be really strong. I also think it could be quite good in a secret mage deck, because you've got a lot of secrets in there. So if you were to play that secret, actually it doesn't have any negative effects to you. But is it worth you spending 8 mana for a 4/7 minion along with a extra spell? Now it does say at the end of your turn, so that'll be at the end of every turn. So if your opponent doesn't kill it, then you will cast another spell on the second turn, and that's when the potential gets a bit stronger. Other classes can use it, of course, because it's neutral, so it's not just a mage issue. You could use it with Mind Control in Priest, but again, are you going to be playing a Priest that doesn't have Dragonfire Potion in it, for example, and Potion of Madness or something, and it's just not going to work every time. Hunter's an interesting one to use it for, because if you played this and for 8 mana, got 4/7, and potentially got the Call of the Wild, for example. Call of the Wild doesn't get played too much anymore, but that would be quite a cool one to get back with it. However, are you really going to drop Kill Command from your deck? Because you don't want to randomly Kill Command your face and cause that damage. So potentially not not a great card. Also, the other issue is those spells have to be in your deck. So if you've already drawn the spell or already played the spell, it's not going to get the ones out that you want. So it's another interesting card to build decks around. I think we'll see a lot of cool decks made with this. Whether or not it will be something that people regularly play right at the top end of the ladder, I'm not sure, but still an interesting one, and it's going to make the game fun. Or it's going to make a lot of people very angry when they pull out the wrong spell. But we'll see how it plays out. The final card is the Arcane Artificer, and it's a common mage minion. It costs 1 mana, has 1 attack and 2 health. It is an elemental, which I think is quite important with this card. But the stats are quite weak, 1 mana, 1/2. It's not particularly a card you want to play on turn 1, especially as the effect is whenever you cast a spell, gain armor equal to its cost. So if you were to play this on turn 1, turn 2 you might have a Frostbolt to play. You might have coin and then a secret to play, which would kind of give you 3 armor and a secret, which is good. But this is a bit of an odd card because when you think of 1-cost minions, you think of what you can play on turn 1. But this is more of a late game card where if you're playing much larger spells, you can play this and then gain a bunch of armor. So you can combine it with as many spells as you want, and if it survives a turn, you can do it again. It's unlikely to happen, but it could in some situations. And also, it's important to note that it isn't elemental, so then because it only costs 1 mana, it's really good for keeping your elemental chains going. So you could just throw it out there at the end of a turn because you know next turn you're playing a Blaze Caller, for example. So it's got potential. However, do you really want to run this in your deck instead of a decent 1-drop, the Mana Worm, for example? Because if you were to draw this and play this on turn 1, are you losing too much tempo? That remains to be seen. It's definitely a card which people will try to play, and in certain circumstances has a really good, strong effect, especially as it's only 1 mana. Not a particularly exciting one, but we are seeing the potential for Elemental Mage grow because we've seen quite a few good Elementals come into this set, so I'm excited to give that deck a try once it comes out. Okay guys, thanks so much for watching. I will be back again tomorrow with another 4 card reveals. Blizz is going to be doing them every day, so be sure to hit the subscribe button if you want to catch up and watch similar videos. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.